I'll call the February 11th, 2025 meeting of the Transportation Committee to order. Good afternoon and welcome. The Transportation Committee reviews items of interest regarding all modes of transportation in the city of Oshkosh, including motor, transit, bike, and pedestrian. We are an advisory committee, and our favorable recommendations today will go before the Oshkosh Common Council as needed. The council can accept or reject any recommendation from the committee. If you don't agree with our decision, you can discuss the item with any council member. If the committee does not recommend an item, a council member may sponsor a new ordinance regarding this item. All ordinance items require 2 readings before the Common Council. The first reading will take place on Tuesday, February 25th at 6 p.m. And you'll be allowed to comment on the item at that time, though the council will take no action. On Tuesday, March 11th at 6 p.m., the item will be on a second reading, at which time the council will take action. You will again be allowed to speak. For this afternoon, I'll read each agenda item, at which time, if you'd like to speak, please step to the podium and give your name and address. I do ask that you keep your comments pertinent to the agenda item. The item will then come back to the committee for discussion and action as necessary. The committee has 2 alternate members who are allowed to participate in discussion but not make motions or be included in roll call votes on agenda items, with the exception of the initial roll call and minutes approval. The committee has adopted a public participation policy which provides 15 minutes for public comment. Citizens must provide their name and address and speak on matters related to transportation issues within the committee's authority. Comments should be addressed to the committee members and not to staff. Items on the agenda should be addressed at the time the item is read, not during the open period for public comment. Statements are limited to 3 minutes, and citizens may only provide comment 1 time unless permission is granted. Written comments sent to the city will be distributed to the committee members and become part of the public record. With that, roll call, please.
Staple?
Here.
Armstrong?
Here.
Merritt?
Here.
Hartman?
Here.
Esslinger?
Here.
Martin?
Here.
Before we begin, before we do the open comments, and I wanted to make a couple comments. One, Ross Wanschneider, who was on this committee for decades, I think, passed away this last week. So just wanted to bring his name out and mention it today because of all his contributions to this committee over the years. And secondly, I wanted to comment to Mr. Collins. I know we're going to be talking about paratransit today, and I think this is an easier facility for our paratransit users to get here and use. So I think that was a good decision to make this move. We'll do old business and then we'll open for public comment. We'll do approval of minutes, then we'll do open comment. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes from January?
Also move. Evelyn.
Ellen moves.
Second.
Mr. Esslinger seconds. Call the roll.
Staple?
Present.
Armstrong?
Aye.
Merritt?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Esslinger?
Aye.
All right, with that, sir, you had a public comment you want to make, so please, your name, address.
Hello, members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Jacob Claymeyer. My address is 505 Hobbs Avenue here in Oshkosh. I'm a resident and a member of this Oshkosh Sustainability Advisory Board. I'm also a graduate of the Leadership Oshkosh program in 2024, and I work as a shelter advocate at the Day by Day shelter on CP Avenue. First, I wanted to thank you all for the committee members as well as the staff for your commitment to safe and accessible transport for everyone, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and bus riders. I'm here to share some transportation issues I've heard from the guests at the Day by Day shelter and suggest some collaborative solutions for your consideration. First, one of the issues that I've seen is some of the guests, while most of them don't have cars, some that do, they typically park along CP Avenue. We have the map pulled up of the shelter. CP Avenue runs as a one-way, kind of southeast there. And across the tracks, there's a residential area that provides street parking per the normal permitting process, right? And typically we have guests call the non-emergency line, report their their license plate number, their parking location and such to get overnight parking access per the city rules. Also, any permits that are required for extended periods. The issue that we've seen or that I've heard from the guests is that there's been some verbal conflicts with the residents along CP Avenue. They're essentially frustrated that people are repeatedly parking outside of their homes, right? And we want to avoid those conflicts if possible. Second, some of the guests store their belongings in their cars, and sometimes, it can really be everything that they own. So if they get a ticket, they get towed, or they have their belongings stolen, it can be really a financial and emotional event, right, in their lives. So at the shelter, we work to provide a lot of stability in their lives so that they can work. That's part of having a car as well, is getting transportation to both work and healthcare services. And by providing that stable environment, we can, empower them to create, their own income, get their own space, and so on, and move on. Having to park outside of the shelter and outside of their control are points of frustration and instability in their lives that I'm hoping to alleviate with your help. Some of the ideas that I have for potential solutions to this, of course, open to collaboration and ideas from this group as well. But one of the ideas is to utilize the Leach Amphitheater parking lot across the street from the day-by-day shelter, particularly in a portion of it, right? That would be directly across from us. In my experience working there, it's a really underutilized lot if there isn't any events going on, really, right? And there's no parking allowed unless there is an event going on typically. Also, the process that we use to make sure that people are, checking their cars in with the non-emergency line doesn't work for this lot because it is part of the Parks Department purview, right? So if people park there, they could get towed at any time. It's really undetermined if it's safe for them to park there. Part of the solution, though, too, wouldn't just be to allow parking here, but also have a special permitting system. We have staff at day-by-day shelter at all times when the guests are there. So we could give out, say, a nightly pass, good for only one night. So we ensure that guests are only temporarily using that area and only guests are using that area as well. Another solution could be potentially Lot 2. It's right next to the Oshkosh Fire Department Station 15 that you can see in the top left corner of the screen. It's also a very underutilized lot in my experience. They do allow permitted parking there, per the signs at least that are posted. This is up to $50 a month, which could be quite substantial for somebody that does not have a home, and is a barrier to a lot of folks parking overnight in that area. But I think it would be a good solution because it's a safe location next to other services, the fire department in particular, and really, I think it would show the city's support for people without homes in this area and help provide some of that stability that will lead to more independence and empowerment. So thank you all for your time, and I hope we can work together to discuss solutions. Questions about shelter services are also welcome. So yeah, with that, I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Given that the leach is under the Parks purview, have you spoken to the Parks Department?
I've spoken with our president, Molly, who's at the day-by-day shelter,
Yeah.
and she was speaking with the Parks Department lead, but I also wanted to bring it to this committee.
Okay. Any other questions?
So the leach obviously is underutilized, but when it is utilized, what would happen on that Thursday night Waterfest?
Yeah, I think
that may cause problems.
I agree. I think in that case, we wouldn't be able to allow parking there. Guests would have to utilize the street parking. We wouldn't be handing out any of those overnight permits so that they, essentially anybody that would be overnight there would not be allowed, right? Just to alleviate any congestion or people leaving their cars there and such so that it can be, safe.
And what's the issue with residents if they're parked there legally with a permit overnight? What's the rub there?
Yeah, the rub, at least on the city parking, is that there's often conflicts with the people, the residents that have homes on those same streets, conflicting with the people that park there. So essentially, there's already been some verbal conflicts with that. And then they also can't get a permit for that Leach Amphitheater parking lot due to it being a Parks Department lot.
No, I guess what I'm asking is, what's the residents' issue with them parking there on the street in front of their homes?
I didn't get that much clarity other than, if there was like threats made against our guests, essentially they're unhappy though with people parking in front of their homes. If you can imagine, like, yeah, just having somebody, a car you don't know in front of your house every night, it's a little unsettling perhaps, or they're just trying to encourage them to move on, I suppose. But I wish we could litigate or mitigate some of those issues like in person and try to work with those residents to make something work. But I think a more holistic solution might be needed, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Just one other thing, sir. I think it's right to go to the Parks Department, obviously. I would like to hear Mr. Collins if he has any thoughts on that, but I think another place to go would be the Police Department and review any ideas that you have with the chief. Because I personally would like to get his opinion also on it. If there are any policing issues that there would be with that, I'd like to hear from him and what he would have to say too.
Yeah, I can just give you my 2 cents quick. So currently there's no overnight parking in any of the city parking lots unless you have a leased parking stall, which obviously is paid. So I have to double check if the leach lot obviously is under the Parks Department, so that would be up to them if they wanted to allow something or not. I know what the concern there's multiple concerns, but I know one concern would be, and I don't know if this is an issue for the residents on the street as well, but is this just people that are parking and staying at the shelter? Are there any issues with people like camping in there or sleeping in their vehicles? Because I could see that causing some issues.
Yeah, I think that's what my potential solution would address, where you only have overnight parking permits available that we would give to guests only, right? So they would put it in their window, it'd have the date on it, and then that way people that were potentially camping wouldn't be able to get a parking permit. So we would want to make sure that, really for the safety of those in the cars, right, that we don't have cars that are unchecked for multiple days at a time. Somebody could be in there, and yeah, that's.
Yeah, because
that's the
I'm just
idea.
saying, it's an issue that's come up in the past that we've had people that were potentially, and I know that's something that the police department living in vehicles, but, so I think, yeah, talking to the Parks Department would be one avenue, but, and talking to the police chief and seeing what he thinks. I guess we can, like we do for stuff like this, I can look into it some more and report back at the next meeting.
Right, I think that would be good.
Thank you for taking the comment, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming with potential solutions, too.
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
always a good starting point.
The old business is request to reduce paratransit hours to 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sunday.
Yep.
Mr. Collins, you want to give us some background on this? We've
Sure.
dealt with this a couple months ago, but
Yep, I'm gonna turn it over to Steve, but, yeah, I think he's got it pretty good, well covered, so I'm just gonna, he's got a short PowerPoint.
okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Just to recap, we met back on November 12th, 2024. We laid out the need for changes in the Go Plus paratransit program, of which were chiefly to improve our on-time service, to provide better reliability for riders, to ensure that their needs are met timely. We don't have people stranded out at Walmart for 2 hours waiting for a ride. Accurate data for federal reporting. This is big. It's a requirement for doing, as a recipient of federal funds, we're required to do several reportings, and it's important that we have accurate data to do this reporting. If we follow this up, we risk jeopardizing our eligibility for federal funds, and that's a huge portion of our budget. Program integrity. Only people who are enrolled and are eligible should be the ones using the benefits for our paratransit program. Additionally, look at improved customer experience, vehicle visibility. Can you see where your driver is? Phone apps, shorter on hold times when people are calling in to schedule a ride. They're not sitting on hold for excessive amounts of time. Easier methods to make a pickup reservation, better customer service, rider confidence, and basically faith in the system. These are our most vulnerable members of our community. We need to make sure that we're taking care of these individuals our riders and do the best that we possibly can for them. The main obstacle in achieving these goals, the ones that we just mentioned, is there's really no competition. Uber and Lyft have chased all the mom and pop cab companies out of business. We need vendors to compete for our business. We want more for our paratransit riders, and we need better compliance with the vendors in which we have. We've worked hard, and much of the improvements are driven by us, not necessarily the vendor. But we have worked good hand in hand with our current vendor, and we have made improvements. We still have a long way to go. And we've been told by vendors when we reach out to other vendors potentially in bidding our contract, they say they're really not interested in the 24/7 service requirements. So without competition, we're really just left with what we get. When we met last November, our riders expressed some serious concerns about the reduction of the program's service hours. So really just to paraphrase, they're very interested in maintaining Sunday service. Going to church is very important to them. They did not want to lose that. And also making sure that the service schedule extended past the fixed route schedule. They felt that cutting back on those hours too drastically would affect their personal lives, and they depend on this for a lot of their social activities. So basically, our riders expressed concerns about the impact of reducing hours too significantly would affect their quality of life. So we went back to the drawing board, crunched some more data, and basically what we're proposing, Monday through Saturday service from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sunday from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Just to skim over some of the numbers, I don't want to dig too deep in, but you can kind of read here. These are some of the facts and figures that we brought up to kind of justify why these hours make sense. If you look at the ADA ambulatory in the left column there, averaging about 4.4 rides a night from 10 p.m. To 6 a.m. December, 132 rides. That's 4.4 rides a night. Basically, not a lot. And considering a lot of these are employment rides that perhaps down the road we can look at folding them into our Access to Jobs program. So we took the data and we brought the proposals to a couple different places. One, we went to the Winnebago County ADRC, met with their board on 12/9/2024, and we also held a paratransit focus group meeting with 8 stakeholders back on 1/24 of 2025. Both very productive meetings. The second one in particular, I'd say about 80–85% of the individuals who expressed concern at the meeting we had back in November were present. We laid out the plan to them, discussed options, and they were, every single one of them was supportive. We've not had a single negative comment on what we're proposing right now. So basically, what we're asking for is recommend the following revised paratransit hours from Monday to Saturday from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., Sunday from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And please note that the Access to Jobs will continue to be 24/7 with no change to the Access to Jobs program. So kept it kind of short and sweet. Everybody's got any questions?
Have you spoken with any potential vendors in terms of, does this change in hours make it more appealing and likely they'll actually bid on a contract?
We haven't specifically because, obviously we don't have it out for bid or anything.
Right.
We have talked to our current vendor and they're good with this. Obviously we have them at least till the end of the year, possibly one more year. But I think that from talking previously, some of you may remember we had a different contractor for non-ambulatory than we did for ambulatory. And when that contractor looked at the bid this last time, I talked to him a little bit about it, and they basically said, he even suggested that at that time when we put out this out for bid last time. He said, honestly, he said, I'm having somebody staff the office for those overnight hours, and I have a driver on call, and we're doing maybe one ride a night, if that. Now, granted, they were only doing the non-ambulatory, so it was only part of the service. But he said, it would really probably you'd get better proposals because we wouldn't have that fixed cost of having that staff on, available whether they're needed or not. And he said, you know, honestly, he said, you're the only system in the state that does 24/7 paratransit service. I mean, not even Milwaukee or Madison do that. So he said by eliminating those overnight hours, that would affect their bid and make it a little more attractive. But we just know that, A, there's that, and we think that because now we're eliminating basically one of 3 shifts, right? So if you had 8-hour shifts, you're only potentially gonna have to staff 2 of those shifts. And you're eliminating the least desirable shift. So I think even with our current vendor or a new vendor, that we're hoping also that we'll get a higher level of service because we'll get a better quality of driver. It'll be easier for them to recruit because let's face it, now they have a shortage of drivers and they have a hard time recruiting drivers, whether it's the current vendor or a new vendor. So by not having to staff that overnight, we think that that will also help to improve the service. And then, like we've talked with our current vendor too, I mean, we're not trying to get rid of them. We're just trying to improve the service, whether it's with them or with someone else. And we think that this is a reasonable way that will lead to better service.
Okay, so the plan is we recommend this tonight, it goes to the council. If they agree to it, then does this change in hours happen soon?
Right.
Or at the next, in January next year when you have another opportunity to?
That's a good question. So what we're thinking is, and I was just gonna clarify that, so both the items tonight, this one and the next one, would be resolutions on the council agenda, so they wouldn't be 2 readings like an ordinance would. But we would take these to the next council meeting, and if they agree, then we're looking at April 1st because like I said, we'd like to improve the service as much as we can, as soon
Sure.
as we can. And also talking with, I think that works out well too, with talking to the county's ADRC director. She said it's hard to make these changes in the winter. She said if you did it like in spring, she said I think that would be the best so that people can adjust their schedules as needed. And that would give us a good month's notice to get the word out on the street and let our riders know that, hey, effective April 1st, these are the new service hours. And I think those rides, like Stephen mentioned, that are overnight, we've talked with Appleton and Valley Transit who, they went further, they reduced their fixed route hours because of staffing issues and whatnot, but they said what they've learned is people have adjusted. So the rides have went down, but a lot of the rides they just shifted to different hours. So will this save, will we get less rides? Probably a few, but some of those riders are just gonna shift their behaviors to meet those hours. And that'll give them a time to adjust to that. So that's what we're thinking, put it on the next council agenda and then potentially look at an April 1st start date. And then that would also give us some time before we put out another RFP or bid to kind of evaluate and make sure it's going
Sure.
okay. And then hopefully improve our current service, right, as quickly as we can.
Okay.
I think the hope of reducing an entire shift, 8-hour window, because I'm sure they're gonna have some drivers still on, but it helps shift that manpower to the course of the day, helps take some pressure off if we do pick up additional rides. It is a shared ride service, so it might make it even more productive. And when it comes time to bid the contract again, we're not bidding it, got one vendor can charge whatever they want because they're the only ones vending, or the only ones bidding on it right now. We're competing, competing against themselves.
Right.
So hopefully it adds some competition to be more cost productive, open up new opportunities. We also have some things we're working on internally to help improve that experience, separate of this, but I think it'll help short-term and long-term provide a better product for our riders.
Okay.
So, the original solution was to go to the regular hours, and this is obviously a different solution, which is, I think, a good solution. But you said in that meeting it was fiscally unsustainable unless we went to the normal hours. Is this gonna be a long-term fiscal solution, or are we gonna have to revisit this a few years down the road? Or?
Well, if we had good batteries in our crystal ball, I could probably give you a good answer. Unfortunately, my Duracells ran out.
I'm not knocking the solution,
no,
I'm just.
I mean, so you're right, this is a compromise.
And a good one.
And I think this is the best, short-term, for everybody involved. Will that affect things long-term? We hope so. But I mean, we're not the vendor. I don't know other companies, how they're gonna view this, right, how attractive that will make us or not make us. But I think it definitely takes a step in the right direction.
Well, we appreciate that. That was an emotionally charged meeting, certainly the most I've ever been involved with in this committee, and appreciate the compromise. I just wanted to make sure that 2 years from now, we're not having the same conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, like Steve said, we don't have a crystal ball, but I think the other thing that always affects transit, and we never know, is to what level, you know, we get federal and state funding. So right now, you know, we've been as low as 52% and we've been high as 60%. We're kind of in the middle right now, but that goes year to year, and it depends on, you know, whatever, both how the budget process goes at the federal and the state level. So that, you know, if that ever goes down drastically, that can impact how some of our services are funded. And then obviously there's the city budget. So, yeah, we don't know what vendors are gonna propose next time. I mean, obviously their costs go up every year, just like everybody else. Fuel goes up, wages go up, benefits go up. So, yeah, we can't answer that for certain, but then it's also based on funding levels. So, as you know, even with the city budget, like, so our transit services are funded right now, 56% is federal and state grants, which paratransit included in that. Then we get a little bit of help from the county. Then we get fares, which can account for up to about 20%, and then usually the other 20% is local. So again, you know, if council decides that they need to, you know, cut somewhere and they decide to cut in that area, that's another potential obstacle. However, it's kind of, it's like anything. It's every year. There's just so many factors that go into it. There's really not a clear answer to that.
I guess I'd like to chime in and second what Jeff said. I think this sounds like a good compromise. But the other thing that I got out of the discussion is I think there is a fairness issue here, and so I want to keep out there that we can get our regular transit and this to kind of be in sync with each other. I think that's just a fairness issue. And this is what we need to work with now, but I just want to raise that issue.
If you look at it, a lot of the answers to questions that transit is posed with, expanding hours, expanding unserviced areas right now. Microtransit, basically the use of cabs in lieu of buses, is very popular right now, and it's very cost efficient. Currently, we're not really in a position, so if we open this up, get more competition, perhaps, whether it be with this vendor or another vendor, hopefully we can get in a position to where we can start expanding that, right? We've got uncovered areas that people would like, you know, the north end of the city, up by Soda Creek, up by the prison, all areas that we can service. It'd be great to service with microtransit, and we just can't do that right now. And even when it comes to, look what Green Bay has eliminated buses on schedules and used this microtransit instead. We've got a couple routes that behoove us to, you know, maybe go to a microtransit because there's not a lot of ridership on those routes. Free up, and maybe somebody else with different equipment or different, you know, there's a thousand different ways to skin this cat, but right now we're kind of really limited to what we can do. So in a way, we might be able to expand down the road by, you know, opening this up, getting more competition, and hopefully maybe taking a half a step back now with the hope and intent to take 2 steps forward down the road when we can do so.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with everything Steve said, and what he's basically referencing is like, and we brought this up at the initial meeting. We didn't really touch on it as much tonight because now we're kind of focused on the hours, but that was part of the intent of getting vendors, whether it's current or a different one, that would potentially be able to provide microtransit service in the future, which, I mean, Green Bay has a really nice model that everybody kind of envies. However, they kind of lucked out. They got the right vendor at the right time, and everything, all the stars aligned, and it worked out well. So they were able to, they had one vendor that started with paratransit, and they were able to kind of take that and expand it into microtransit. A lot of things happened right, and the stars aligned for that to happen. But like Steve said, hopefully someday in the near future, if we can get somebody that's capable of doing that, and then we can potentially look moving forward on some of those things.
Okay. Do we have a motion on this?
I'd move it.
Okay. Mr. Staple moves. We have a second?
Second.
Mr. Armstrong seconds. Ready to vote? Call the roll, please.
Staple?
Aye.
Armstrong?
Aye.
Merritt?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Heslin?
Aye.
New business, the layout of Bowen Street, the little triangle by Mill and Wagoo and Bowen. Mr. Collins, would you give us some background on that?
Sure, I'll give you a quick synopsis and then, you may remember that AECOM, who's the city's consultant we've been working with on this project, they presented a proposed layout of Bowen Street from Otter to East Parkway in January of '24. They're now completing the 60% plans, as they call it in the engineering world. So they're here today. Steve's here from AECOM, and then Justin Gierek, our city engineer, is here as well. So Steve is going to present specifically on the design in the area of the intersection of Bowen, Mill, and Wagoo. So I'll let him kind of get into the details on it. So I'll turn it over to Steve.
That's forward, that's backwards.
Like Jim had mentioned, AECOM is under contract with the city to do the plans for the reconstruction of Bowen from Otter to Parkway. And we met with this committee back in January of last year, '24, and had a couple different alternatives, I think, for about the closure of Mill Street. One, obviously, just leave it as it is. But this is just a rough layout of what we're looking at this point with the closure of Mill Street between Bowen and Wagoo. I'm going to go into a little more detail. After that meeting, actually you guys probably saw this one too, we had some crash data at that location. As you can see, there's a cluster at Wagoo and Bowen, a couple, including a pedestrian accident at the school in Mill Street and Bowen. So that's one of the things we took into account was crash occurrences. There's a sight distance problem at Wagoo Wagoo is one way going down on the sheet, but there is a sight distance because of that house being tight to the right-of-way line on the corner. People can't see that a vehicle on Bowen when they're making a left or a right turn at that location. That's one thing that we considered. And then after that meeting last year, we actually went out and set up some more cameras to get some traffic counts on who's actually using that Mill Street slip lane is what we call it between Bowen and Wagoo. How many cars are actually using it? So we got some numbers there. About 186 vehicles a day were using that, and most of those were continuing to use Mill Street to the other side of Wagoo. There's a apartment complex in the middle of that block. Let me just forward ahead. That we were concerned that maybe a lot of vehicles were coming in here, but most of the vehicles of the 186 were just continuing on through Mill Street, past Otter or south of Otter. So that number we thought was pretty low. It's going to go back here. We also took a look at a couple other things I think we presented to the committee about what we talked about, constructing some bump outs at the corners, which would shorten the pedestrian crossings, improve some of the sight distance, like I mentioned, the one at Wagoo and Bowen, and it also puts in a traffic calming measure as there's a little bit more curb and green space at some of those locations where drivers tend to slow down and calms traffic. And it also obviously increases the green space. There's that small triangle there right now that is maintained by one of the neighborhood associations. And this would expand that quite a bit by closing off that strip of Mill Street. So this is actually the where we're at now as far as the design. You can see that we closed off Mill Street between Bowen and Wagoo. The driveways are extended for those three parcels that we now come onto Bowen instead of Mill Street. We get rid of the slip lane, or what we call the slip lane, which is a sort of a non-standard movement for people to get onto that. And that would force those vehicles, the 186 or so, potentially, to go down to Otter and make a right and then get back onto Mill Street at that point. We did include the bump out locations at the corners. This one will greatly impact or improve the sight distance at that corner for people turning onto Bowen from one way to do. And then, like I said, it also increases associations, for greenery and other things, landscaping items and things that would spruce that area up quite a bit. So I guess the recommendation to the committee, based on the data we collected, the traffic counts and the crash data, is to, and the non-standard movement of that movement from Bowen to get onto Mill Street is to remove that short section in between. Justin, anything to add?
How do the 3 households that'll have to build bigger driveways, get the snow off bigger driveways, all the rest, but also get a lot bigger yard, look anyhow, if it's not their yard, it'll look like it is.
It'll
How do
look
they
like
feel
it's
about
their
it?
yard. We contacted those parcel owners, and the city did, right before, I think, Thanksgiving, and no responses up to this point. I think a couple another times, I think they were all invited to tonight's meeting.
Yeah, we noticed them for this meeting. I know
yeah.
that, yes, we reached out to them, noticed them for this meeting, and I know that engineering sent them a letter previously and tried to reach out to them, but
Right.
I don't believe it's heard anything back.
No responses back.
So if I'm looking at this map correctly, those are driveways then? Ingress and egress on Bowen
Yeah,
Street?
these would be their extended driveways onto Bowen.
And they're
And
okay
then-
with that? Or we don't know?
That's what I was asking,
Yeah.
yeah.
They don't require them.
Yeah.
So,
And, go ahead. I was just gonna say, would the responsibility be the homeowners for all that extra green space?
Yeah, technically, it's still gonna be, the city's right of way, it's not gonna be vacated as far as road right of way. The intention is to put it out there for some of the neighborhood associations to landscape it with beddings and plants.
Oh, okay.
Like that small triangle that you can just barely see it here under the color, there's that existing small triangle
Oh,
in there
mhm.
now. And that, the hope for the plan is to just have that expanded by.
Okay.
So who's responsible for snow removal?
So, looking at, no, I don't think it's fully finalized yet. I think we want to keep the sidewalk along what would be the westerly line of the vacated slip lane would be a responsibility of the property owners right directly adjacent to it. I think the city would coordinate, whether that be Parks, Public Works, whoever's kind of got something in the area, to snow removal and maintain the rest of the sidewalks kind of along that triangle corridor.
But I mean, the driveway from the sidewalk out to Bowen.
The driveways would be the property owner's responsibility to maintain, no different than if it was your apron at your house. Yeah, they're certainly larger and longer, at most, from the garage, so the furthest south one, from the garage, so on private property out to the road edge is somewhere around 60 feet. So
Are
it's
those two
not-
properties owner occupied or are those rentals?
I wanna say one of them was a rental.
I think one's a rental, I'm not sure on the other two, but I think there are some potential for rentals and owner occupied.
Other questions?
Were there any other possibilities?
Other than leaving it as it is, we had some other possibilities, but most of those had to do with potentially reconfiguring how a group comes in, if it's a one-way versus a two-way. And I think there were a couple other of the alternatives that were a little bit of a smaller triangle, but the driveways are still gonna be longer compared to what they are now coming down the wall.
I think at a staff level, this is a desired change to make this area safer. That intersection as it is today is very unsafe and difficult to traverse if you're heading, northbound on Mill trying to get north on Bowen. That is a very tough angle to look at and try to exit or enter onto Bowen. So I think this was brought up before my time in this role. It's 10, 12, I don't know, Jim, were you around when this came up last?
It's come up, yeah, it's come up a couple times. Over the years, it's come up like once before since I've been here, but it came up prior to that. I know it's been an issue for a while.
And I think there's now with us working on the Bowen design, and the reconstruction, full reconstruction of Bowen, now is a great time for us really to clean this up.
I would just have to say from driving sometimes there, not that often, it has been very confusing to me. So I completely, just from my observation, it makes so much sense.
So when we send out notices to those residents, do we send out, like, will we get the packet that has the actual visual of what that will be? Do these, or do they just get notice that there's a meeting or there's gonna be a change?
Yes, they get it depends on what the item is, but generally they get a notice with, there is an item on the transportation committee that could potentially affect you that you may be interested in. I don't remember, Jan, do you, what specifically we sent with this one? But a lot of times I'll try to send something with it.
It's just that notice and then the copy of the agenda.
Okay, so this one, they got a copy of the agenda and then notice, and then I don't remember what you have on your engineering letter. but-
Yeah, I don't remember specifically if there was a figure that was sent to them with the letter. But again, I think it was, hey, we're looking to make some changes as part of the Bowen reconstruct. It probably did describe in words that what we're looking to do. Give us a call, we wanna meet with you and talk with you to see what your questions and concerns are.
Cause I know especially that one house on the corner, if my driveway was gonna increase by, it looks like 90% or 80%, that would be a huge concern for me.
Yeah, are there gonna be any special assessments to the homeowner, or the property owners there?
No,
So, but who would pay for the driveways?
that will be part of the special assessment fund that council created about a year ago.
So their only cost will be maintaining the
Correct.
property once you're done with it.
Correct.
How many feet is that long one there, about in the middle of the Mill Street? How many feet is that from this
Again, from-
sidewalk to Bowen?
I can't tell you from a sidewalk, but you can see the aerial image behind it, so there's the garage there.
Yeah,
From there to, the Bowen, so basically the driveway would be about 60 feet long. Again, so you take away, probably 20-ish feet for a setback, so it'd be about, guessing about a 40-foot extension.
It's doable.
If the committee can visualize, since we don't have any visuals up per se, off of Harrison and Jefferson area, kind of a little further north of here, we do have some areas where we've cul-de-saced off,
Yeah.
kind of that to kind of prevent the same kind of movements. That is really not a feasible in this location due to the sharp angle that Mill and Bowen interact. Harrison was a little shallower of an angle, allowing for room for a cul-de-sac to be created. So, actually talked internally today about what that would look like to put a cul-de-sac on that north end, or really the south end, coming off of Wagoo, to try to minimize the length of that driveway. Apron is really what it is. But in reality, it's probably gonna be even longer to get to a cul-de-sac because of how far south it would have to be to even get close to being standard size cul-de-sac to be able to maintain.
But if you did that, people would be exiting going north. I mean, they're not gonna go on, they're not gonna get into Wagoo from there. That's where you're doing the cul-de-sac,
Nope, it would be
correct?
cul-de-sac for heading northbound, would cul-de-sac before you'd get to the Bowen intersection.
Okay.
Let's assume we approve this tonight. Then when it goes to, before the council, do these people get noticed again?
I don't believe so.
Okay, because I mean, I guess from where I'm sitting, we have to assume if they've been noticed, that and have said nothing, that they're okay with it. But a picture's worth 1,000 words. And if they were gonna get noticed again, I was gonna say, send them a picture before it's a fait accompli. That's my only,
I mean, one thing I think we can, and we can work through is getting, and again, it's another letter from the city. I don't know how many those actually get read or not, but we could send a letter with the video, link to this meeting to have them look at it and potentially even include like this slide in the mailer.
because I can see good things. I mean, it looks like you've got a huge front yard. It makes it, everything else, there's a lot of pluses there too, besides the safety, but, we want everybody to have the full thoughts on it.
Has it
Well-
been published in the Herald? A proposal or anything? Is that something that could happen?
I can tell you the city, not that I'm aware of.
Well,
Sometimes they pick up stuff from this meeting. I know
Yeah,
their
nobody's
reporter watches
here,
this
really.
meeting, so you know, obviously it's up to them what they put in the paper, but I do think that, well, I think from a staff level, we gotta consider what's in the public's best interest, and obviously, like Justin said, for safety, this is the best solution. Now, is it gonna inconvenience, you know, those 3 properties potentially? But we do our best job to notice people, and if, you know, like Justin said, I think we could do that. We, you know, go over above and beyond and
Yeah.
send them another notice with the link to this meeting, say it is gonna be considered at the council agenda, you know, and have engineering ask, you know, hey, give us a call if you'd like to discuss it before the meeting. I know they do that with a lot of other things, and that, at least before the meeting, then you can explain what's going on and why. But, you know, the time I've been doing this, you know, you do your best to notice people,
Yeah.
and at some point, it's like, we did everything we could, and at that point, it's like, well, you know, if they don't reach out, they don't reach out. I guess then either they're not concerned, or, you know, they don't care, I guess.
It actually gives them buffer away from traffic a little bit. That street was practically next to their houses. They're gonna actually have,
There are
some ways
pluses there
better.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So there's pluses and minuses, like there is to everything, but, yeah, like Justin said, I mean, I think that that's reasonable. You can send another letter, and we got 2 weeks to do that.
well, my perspective is, I think it's irrelevant to some extent. We've got to fix this problem. We've had this problem for decades. I wouldn't want another committee sitting here just like dealing with Sawyer and Oshkosh Ave. You know, we're gonna finally fix that. Let's fix this now that we have the opportunity. If we don't fix it now, it won't get fixed for another 40 years. So I think, I know it may be an inconvenience. There's also some positives to it, but as far as I'm concerned, it's irrelevant. For the greater good, we need to fix that intersection.
Yeah, I guess the only negatives that I can really see here is you're adding a couple conflicts, oh, I don't know, ingress and egress points on Bowen Street now for people to get in to their driveways. But I don't know if that's such a big deal or not.
And again, I would argue yes, Bowen is a heavily traveled street, but I would argue that they're safer ingress and egress now, or I would say as proposed onto Bowen, than they were when you're trying to exit or enter onto Mill, when you've got a weird intersection of Mill to try to get in and out of, as well as Bowen you're worried about.
Yeah, I would say, you know, this is one of its kind of, like Chairman Hartman mentioned, it's one of the, as being here for a while now, this has come up a few times, and this is the opportunity to do something about it. The Sawyer, you know, and Oshkosh Ave comes up, and it's like, finally, there's an opportunity to do something. And the other one is the Jackson Street division, that whole area, which is gonna get resolved with the new bridge. So I think, man, as time goes on, it's like, it's kinda exciting to see, all right, we're finally addressing some of these things that seem to come up repeatedly. And, you know, like you said, that when the chance presents itself, either do something now, or it's just gonna stay that way for a long time.
Right. So do we have a motion on this?
So moved.
Second?
So Mr. Staple moved and Mr. Esslinger seconded. Are we ready to vote? Call the roll, please.
Staple?
Aye.
Armstrong?
Aye.
Aye.
Parker?
Aye.
Esslinger?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, council meeting starts at 5 o'clock today, so I've got to
So-
skip out.
You good? Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
I
It's
don't
always
want
good to
anyone
see
to
you.
cry or anything.
I guess that's a good reason.
So staff statements, ridership update.
Yeah, so I'll keep it pretty quick here. Basically, the year-end numbers for 2024. Fixed route ridership excluding student rides was up 8.76% from 24 to 23. Student ridership actually took a slight decline of 4.48%, which I think isn't necessarily less kids using the system, but I think we've done a lot to tighten up our system, and I think there's less joyriding going on, and kids are basically using it to get to and from school, which is good by us. The happiest thing that I can announce, and I don't want to jinx anything, and Lord willing, we keep on track. We have yet to have a single student suspended on the bus this year, which is biblical difference from the years come by, but can't express that enough. So very proud of the staff. I appreciate the cooperation between Oshkosh Area School District, OPD, done a lot to change some things and make our system safer, not only for our students, but really for all the public who ride the bus. Comparing it to pre-pandemic numbers, to keep it real simple, we're averaging about 7,000 less rides a month, 2019 pre-pandemic numbers than we are now, so still struggling to get back to where we were pre-pandemic.
What's school attendance, so isn't school attendance down too?
That I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
I have to go to the school board and ask them.
Enrollment's
Yeah.
down, yes.
That's about it for ridership updates.
And then I just had one other item, just an FYI more than anything, we have a pedestrian mall ordinance. And currently we have one on Elmwood Avenue by the university, and then there's an alley adjacent to the 400 East parking lot. The pedestrian malls are technically under the plan commission, but I just thought to give you an FYI. The city, with requests from the bid and others, are looking at adding the Algoma Art Alley as a pedestrian mall. So that's the area, Algoma and Main Street, kind of on the northwest corner.
Kind of behind
Art
Moo Moo?
Alley.
Yes.
Yep. So,
Right at the entrance of the back of Movie Hall.
right, yep.
Just
So
saw-
basically,
just saw it.
yeah, so a pedestrian mall just means that it would restrict like vehicle access to that area, other than an exception for those businesses for deliveries and stuff like that. But want to create it more pedestrian friendly and restrict vehicle access other than, like I said, for deliveries or things like that. So we're working with the city attorney to update that ordinance, but we just thought it'd be a good idea just to give you an FYI.
Thank you for that. Future agenda requests from the committee? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move. Evelyn?
Second.
Who seconded? Oh, Mr. Armstrong
Yeah.
seconded. Call the roll.
Staple,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Merritt,
Aye.
Hartman.
Aye.
All right.
All right,
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you. So both those